So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to draw anything with cross-hatching. Now, cross-hatching is one of my favourite techniques for sketching and drawing. It's a really simple, fun way of showing tone and values. And tone and values is pretty much what a lot of drawing and sketching is about. It's about what a lot of art is about, you know. So let's start with some of the fundamentals. Let's start with sketching some, lights and darks and how we build those values. I think the best way of explaining it is just how light and dark something is. So if you imagine the lightest tone is the white on the paper. So that's the first thing to remember. So the first layer of shade that goes into there is a single crosshatch, but it's actually called a hatch. So that's just hatching. And then obviously, so that would be number one. And then if you do the same one again, and then go across the hatch, which is where you get your cross-hatching, that's going to be a next layer of shade. So that's slightly darker. Now, you can continue crossing and layering those up. So if we do let's do a vertical hatch. I'm trying to keep these equally spaced apart so that you can sort of see the principle. So that's 3 layers of lines there. There's a vertical element and then a kind of cross element there. Now you can again build that up and have 4 layers. So what we can do is we can go horizontally, not so easy when I'm trying to keep the paper on the table. Vertically, now you might have noticed I'm not using a fountain pen today, I'm just using a fine liner because I want to keep this one a bit more universal. It's not that I don't love fountain pens, it's just that not everybody else does. And I think also one of the joys of this technique is its simplicity. Okay, so we have single, there's 2, 3, and 4. And as you can see, it's starting to get darker and darker. And you can just continue doing that. What you can do is you can sort of layer them up at, instead of going at 90-degree angles or sort of perpendicular, you can actually just layer them up slightly differently. So if you were to go like that, and then like that, and then go truly at 45 degrees. So again, I'm just stacking these up at different angles. I mean, this is a lot of cross-hatching, but sometimes you will do a lot of cross-hatching. See, now I think when you get to this stage, the easiest thing to do, if you can, if you want to make a darker tone, is to bring those lines a little bit further in. So we'll say that's 5. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the cross-hatching, but instead of using the spacing that you've seen in number 1 and 2, and then where I've just laid them up in different angles, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to bring those hatches a lot closer together. So let's see how that looks. Now don't worry about your lines being wonky. Don't worry if they're not straight. They don't actually have to be straight. What you're looking for is the value. You're not looking for necessarily neatness or anything like that. But what I will say is this is definitely one of those techniques that the more you do it, the faster you get. And actually, your lines and spacing and your straightness of your lines will improve if you're bothered about it, which I'm really not. I quite like leaving it a bit loosey-goosey. So as you can see, when they're much closer together like that, you get a much darker colour. But again, you can do the same thing as I've showed you before of like completely layering those up. But if you can layer them up with the same density. And then you could probably go another layer darker again by keeping them even closer together here and then just fully black. So what I might do is just do that really quick. One of the things I often think about with the cross-hatching technique is on the page, if you can get some really white areas, then you can get some truly black areas. It may be that you save the real black areas for some really super dark pictures of the scene you're trying to capture. So if you look at that scene, if you look at that reference drawing and go, where's the black going to be? And if you decide on that from the beginning, what you can do is you can keep that in mind as you're constructing the scene. And because if you use the whole, literally the whole range. So if you, on your picture, if you have a black, a true black, not true black, a dark black, and you also have white areas, you're using the whole spectrum of tones that are available on that page. And you don't always have to do that, but I think if you're looking for contrast and you're looking to use as much contrast as possible in your art, then that's a good way of working. So I don't really think we can go a lot darker there without actually going, without actually just going fully black. Well, you probably could. You could probably go one more tone, but you get the idea. So if you were to do the next stage here, I mean, I'm literally colouring in now. So there you go. There's 8 different levels there, with 8 being virtually completely coloured in. But you could actually do a lot more. I mean, there's probably a tone you could squeeze between that and the dark one. But I hope you get the idea. So that's really, with hatching and cross hatching, how we actually develop tonally and how we get tones in a picture. So if we start looking at some really simple examples of putting that into practice. So let's start with something as simple as a cube. Let's straighten the sides up a little bit so that we have a cube there. So say, for example, we have the light source coming from above. And there's our little sun. So this is going to be the lightest shade on the top. And then this side is going to be darker. And this is going to be not as dark, but a little bit dark. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave that as a white. And then this is going to be level 1, as we see here. And then I might go for like a level 3 on that side. So that's completely white. Yeah, so our level 1. Now I'm not thinking about the angle of the crosshatch here. I'm just going to put it in at this angle for now. We're going to be talking about the angles of crosshatching in a bit. So I'm going to go 45 degrees on the plane roughly. So I'm sort of going corner to corner there, and then we'll go the same here. So roughly corner to corner. And so there you go. So you can see there we have a slightly darker on that side, dark there, and then we have light there. Now, another way you can sort of embellish this a little bit is if you wanted to put a little bit of shadow on here, you could do that. Again, the shadow's gonna be in line with the sun, like that. So that's our sort of basic cube. Now you can embellish that a little bit. Again, using tones. I'll just show you another version of that. So we're going to keep our whites. Put a little bit more perspective into this one. So we're going to keep our whites on the top, and then we're going to do basically the same as before here. So I hope you got that. It's pretty simple once you sort of get used to doing that. So secondly, I want us to have a look at angles of cross-hatching and why we choose certain angles under certain circumstances. So when it comes to the angles for cross-hatching, one of the things to keep in mind is that not only are you using it for tones and shade and those values of light and dark, but you can use the direction of cross-hatching to try and help you show a little bit about form. So say, for example, if we were drawing a bit of a tree trunk here, obviously I'm not drawing the whole tree. This is the bottom of the tree, sort of looking at, we're going to have a few little tufts of grass sticking up there. So when it comes to cross-hatching, I could obviously go and do some vertical lines on this, and I could do some horizontal lines, but that's going to kind of look a bit weird. I'm going to actually draw a little bit more of the tree heading up there. So when it comes to describing the form, what I would like to do is think about how the form actually looks. So again, going back to this cylinder, as we're looking at the bottom of the tree, we're going to be looking at a shape like that. If we're stood at, we're sort of head height here, looking at this tree, that's a person, by the way, a very strange person. That's going to appear as a circle, and then as you look up, that's going to appear, as an ellipse. That's going to appear as an ellipse, and as the tree gets higher up, it's going to get rounder and rounder. So if you think about that, you can use that sort of to describe the form. And when it gets to head height, a cross-section of the tree is going to appear as a line, because obviously as you get further down, because of perspective, let's use my cup. As you get further down there, you see, if you watch that cup, as it comes up to your eye line, it becomes flat. And then as it goes up again, you can see the bottom. So there's that ellipse. Sounds like I'm Captain Obvious here, but sometimes it's easier to show rather than explain it. I love tea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that shape of the more roundy bit at the bottom of the tree here. I'm going to assume the light's coming from vaguely over here with this one. And then as we get further up, the lines become like that, and then they become like that up here. And then they're much rounder up here. And then, as I said before, you can use some vertical elements as well, because the trunk is vertical. So a little wonky line to show texture. So I hope you can see that. Obviously, my recording's gone a bit awry there. So here we've used some really quick cross-hatching, but I've actually changed the angle and I've curved it round to try and show form. So how does that work in a more sort of geometric thing? Well, say for example, let's go back to, instead of doing a cube, let's do a house. So with an example like this, you could put cross-hatching at an angle, like at a 45-degree angle, but it might look a bit weird. So you could try and explain to the viewer that this is a vertical surface, this is a vertical surface, by applying cross-hatching vertically. So you can go down like this. So by applying vertical hatching to that area, you're really helping to reinforce in the viewer's eye that is a vertical surface. Because if you did the same thing, I should have done this one first actually, just to show you an example, but it feels like it's leaning backwards. It feels like it's sort of leaning away from you. Now, if you wanted to do a darker version of this hatching, if you do that and you think, oh, do you know what? I like it, but I want it to be darker, and I don't like the fact that it's done at an angle. All you do is you cancel it out with a cross hatch. See, one hatch one side, one hatch the other. So if you keep it at roughly the same angle, so we are roughly here, and roughly the same density in terms of the sort of thicknesses between the lines, and this is not accurate at all, but you get the idea. So what you're reading there is you're going to read those diamonds. So that diamond shape, which is between the crosshatch in the white area like that, even though you've got two different angles, what you'll read is that diamond, and that diamond, as long as it's vertical on that vertical shape, it's going to read it's going to read correctly. So I hope that makes sense. So the angle that you put your cross-hatching on can really quite dramatically affect how that shape is going to look. So here I have a little wooden boat toy, which I actually found in a cupboard a while ago. And this was bought on a family holiday about 35 years ago. And I completely lost it. It was in the bottom of a box of like childhood toys. And I stumbled across it. And you know when you have a visceral rush of the past and it just woof, and you suddenly remember that day on the beach when you got this toy and you were playing with it. It's quite uncanny. Anyway, So let's draw this. A pretty simple shape. I'm just going to pop it there like that. So that's roughly the sketch there of this little boat. As you can see, it's a very simple little shape. There's nothing to it really, not that complicated. So how do I hatch this? Well, it's a lot darker inside, and it is vertical inside, and that helps tell that story. This is a little bit lighter, and it's also a slightly different angle, so you can do that, and that will help tell that story. That's light on top. This is the lightest area here on the top surface, and then we have some shadow around here, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not constant. It's darker at the front and it gets lighter as you go back. So again, we can start with those quite close together. And as we come back, now there's a dark area around the mast here. So that can be our sort of true black. And I'm going to darken this line here because that's coming away from this there. So that's a slightly more complicated shape. But I also have some details in the, a little bit of shadow in the material of the sail, but I can cross that in with just some cross hatch like that. It's almost like the sort of weave of the fabric, if you know what I mean. So this also works for more organic shapes. So say, for example, if you had a pebble or a sort of bean shape, you can apply a hatch at that sort of angle, but you can also cross that up, and again you can put curve into those hatches, so you can come like this. So as you can see there, you can apply to a more organic shape, you can apply, like I did with the tree, you can apply it in a curve. So this is something that you can experiment with yourself and have a play. So here we have quite a odd shape, but it's all flat sides. So say, for example, if we had some sun coming from up here, this is going to be the darkest area probably because it's underneath there. And then we're going to have that's going to cast some shadow onto this area here. And then this is going to be a little bit darker. So this is a vertical shape here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shade that in. You can see that with verticals. Again, I'm quite quick here. So as you can see, changing the angle of the hatching there really does help to having that going that way does really help to make that read as a surface that's at that angle, if you know what I mean. So that's something you can think about. Now, these techniques of angles and choices and where you put those, really, there is certain rules that you can look at and sort of, I've given you a couple of basic tips here, but what actually you'll find more is, like all these things, is it comes down to your own experience. So if you're unsure about, if you're sketching something which is an unusual shape, if you're sketching a wheel, something like that, and you think, I don't know how to crosshatch it. Basically, draw it out 3 or 4 times. Try doing it like this. Try doing it that way. Try some different techniques. And if you just basically mock it up as a simple sort of cylinder and just, I know I'm being very sketchy here, but how long does it take to do 3 versions? And then think about different ways you could crosshatch it. What's going to work best. You get the idea. So have a play. And that's the really nice thing, and it's something that I really try and teach a lot, is this idea of, you don't necessarily have to draw a picture. If you want to do some drawing and do some art, you can mess about like this, just doodle away. And that in many ways is actually more useful when it comes to learning techniques like cross-hatching and stuff like that, particularly if it's like a technical thing like applying watercolor or something like that, where actually you want to chase the bead, you want to get certain areas crisp. Because when you've got all those skills down, you can start to be loose, if that makes sense. So there we go. We've got our values down and we've got our angles of cross-hatching. So now we're going to do a little simple example sketch, and you can see how I use those values and I use the sort of choice of angles to describe the scene. So I hope that all makes sense. I think that worked out quite well in the end. And I really want you to realise that, this super simple techniques means you can go out with a sketchbook and a pen, nothing else. And you can capture, really nicely any scene you want to, whether it's drawing people or landscapes or, boats or whatever. You can use the crosshatch method very effectively to show tone and value. So I hope you enjoyed that. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.